The darkness of the dungeon could no longer cage a heart that had found the truth. Alara knelt on the cold stone floor, the silver shears in her hands no longer a cold weapon, but an instrument, vibrating in harmony with the heartbeat of the silver scar on her wrist. She raised the blades and touched them to the bars woven from discarded dragon silk. She did not cut. Instead, Alara closed her eyes and listened. The bars were woven from resentment and abandoned dreams, from promises broken mid-sentence, from lives paused and never resumed. She whispered a melody from silver, hold a song not of defiance, but of release. The shears glided soundlessly along the weave, and the silk bars responded, loosening, sighing, dissolving into harmless strands that pulled at her feet. "Thank you, Julian," she murmured. The bridge between their souls had given her the final key, the ability to unweave any dragon silk, no matter how corrupted its origin. Alara slipped from the dungeon into the misted glass corridors of the palace. What she saw there was worse than any cell. The guards lining the halls no longer moved of their own will. From the nape of each neck, threads of dark violet silk rose upward, disappearing into the ceiling like marionette strings. Their eyes were open wide, unblinking, but inside them swam only the murky purple haze of domination. Silken Gate was becoming a perfect fabric, every thread aligned, every movement predicted, every flaw erased. A kingdom without freedom, a kingdom without soul. As Alara neared the grand hall, the air grew heavy, warped by power. The original loom blazed with the distorted, ominous light. At its center hung Julian. He was no longer merely restrained. He was the axis. Encased completely in porcelain white silk, Julian resembled a colossal cocoon shaped like a man. From him radiated thousands upon thousands of violet threads, stretching outward across the city, into homes, minds, and hearts. He was the heart of the system, the living engine of obedience. "You are persistent, Weaver," the king's voice echoed from the throne. He stood amid rippling distortions of space, gripping a shuttle forged from solid gold. Reality itself bent around him, shaped by the thread of dominion. "You have turned him into a slave of your loom," Alara said, stepping into the hall, the silver shears gleaming in her grasp. "But you forgot something." She lifted her gaze, unafraid. "Dragon silk endures only when it carries life. What you are weaving is nothing but paralysis wrapped in gold. Paralysis is perfect peace." The king roared. He hurled a storm of razor-sharp violet threads toward her, thousands of them shrieking through the air. Alara did not retreat. She spun, her movements fluid, faster than sight, afterimages of her hands trailing light. She gathered the discarded whispers of the throne's stray threads, failed oaths, rejected destinies, and wove them into a living wall of silver mist. The king's threads struck it and disintegrated, reduced to ash. "I didn't come to fight you," Lara said calmly. Her eyes locked onto Julian's white cocoon. "I came to finish our weaving." She ran. The palace trembled as the king unleashed the full force of the thread of dominion. Space twisted, time staggered. The violet threads screamed in defiance. But Alara reached Julian. The silver scar on her wrist and the one etched into his cocoon flared in unison. A deep, resonant sound rolled through the hall, not noise, but recognition. Two souls calling across the last veil. The king screamed and drove all his power into the loom. Too late. Alara pressed her forehead against the cold silk. "Julian," she whispered, "can you hear me?" A faint pulse answered her. "Don't let him dictate your heartbeat," she said, voice steady despite the chaos. "Don't let him turn your sacrifice into his victory." Her grip tightened around the shears, not in violence, but in trust. "Let's tear this fabric apart together." Within the cocoon, a silver glow began to spread through the tiniest fractures. The porcelain shell quivered. The loom shrieked in protest. This was no longer a battle between ruler and rebel. It was a struggle for the final thread of humanity before it could be swallowed forever by a throne built on silence. The grand hall of Silken Gate Palace shook violently under the pressure of two opposing currents of magic. On one side burned the king's dark violet radiance of absolute authority. On the other shone the gentle yet unyielding silver light emanating from Ilara's scar. The dragon silk threads hanging from the ceiling began to snap, falling like a storm of ashen snow. "Do you think you can reverse this loom?" the king roared, swinging the golden shuttle in his hand as he wove a dense web of barbed silk around Ilara. "I am the one who created this order. I am the weaver of Silken Gate's prosperity." Ilara did not answer. She did not look at the king at all. Her focus remained fixed on the porcelain white cocoon encasing Julian. She pressed both palms against the icy silk. Through the silver scar, she felt a faint pulse, like the distant echo of a dragon imprisoned deep beneath the earth. "Julian, if you can hear me, loosen these knots from the inside," she whispered, her voice carrying through the howling storm of magic. "I will be the hands that weave, and you will be the eyes that untangle. Together, we will reweave this design." At once, the white cocoon blazed with light. Inside the silken shell, Julian was fighting a silent battle. Though his body had turned to stone like silk, the soul of the untangler still endured. He began to identify the violet threads parasitizing his body. With Ilara's magic guiding him, he did not sever them. Instead, he slowly loosened the knots of power the king had bound so tightly. When the king's web of barbed silk touched Ilara, it suddenly softened, dissolving into harmless, flowing ribbons. The backlash of magic forced the king to stagger backward. "Impossible," he cried, staring at his golden shuttle as it dulled and lost its sheen. "The price of reversing this loom is every human sensation. You will no longer feel pain, no longer feel love." Ilara felt a numbing chill spread from her fingertips. Her eyes gradually lost the ability to perceive color, until the world around her collapsed into the stark black and white of fate. Yet instead of fear, she felt an unexpected calm. This was the final exchange, sacrificing the small self to free everyone else. "That price, I accept it," Ilara said, her voice flat, stripped of emotional inflection, yet filled with unshakable power. She raised the silver shears and interlaced her hands with Julian's silk-altered hand as it broke through the cocoon. A union never before seen in Silken Gate's history. A cut guided by the vision of an untangler and executed by the hands of a weaver. Together, they struck. Their aim was the root thread, the one siphoning the life force of the kingdom to sustain the throne. A delicate sound was heard, yet the noise sent a tremor through the very foundations of the palace. All the dark violet threads binding the people outside dissolved at once into mist. The living puppet stirred, awakening in confusion as warmth returned to their hands. The king collapsed to his knees, his body rapidly changing as the stolen energy was severed, wrinkles and age crashing upon him in an instant. Amid the ruined hall, the white cocoon around Julian shattered like an eggshell, fragment by fragment. Ilara caught him as he fell into her arms. His body was no longer entirely silk, yet the silver thread scars remained etched into his skin as testimony to the sacrifice made. They sat together amid the remnants of the fallen dynasty. True dawn began to rise, sunlight piercing the wreckage. They had won, but the silence between them carried a bitter aftertaste. They looked at each other, yet their eyes had grown distant, as if gazing into another plane of reality entirely. The grand hall of Silken Gate Palace was now nothing more than a glittering field of ruin beneath the newborn sun. Shards of shattered silk glass littered the stone floor, scattering the morning light into thousands of fractured sparks. Yet for Ilara, that radiance no longer existed. She looked down at her hands. They no longer carried the warmth of living flesh, only shades of gray and white layered in quiet monotony. She lifted her gaze toward the broken dome overhead, where the sky should have been a deep blue of promise. There stretched only a pale, colorless expanse. Alara! Julian's voice came from beside her. She turned. In her eyes, the man who had crossed death with her appeared like a meticulous charcoal sketch. The white silk scars on his face and arm blended seamlessly into a silvery gray complexion. He was beautiful in a still, restrained way, but the vivid depth of his gray eyes, the light she once loved, had dissolved into the same monochrome reality she now inhabited. "You're awake," Alara said. Even her own voice sounded unfamiliar, calm, level, stripped of joy or fear. She registered the warmth of Julian's hand when he took hers, but it no longer sent her heart racing. It was merely information, heat transferred through skin. Julian looked into Alara's eyes, and as an untangler, he understood instantly the horror that had occurred. Her thread of fate, once blazing with the chaotic colors of defiance, was now clear as water. She carried no remaining hues of humanity. "You traded it away," Julian whispered, his voice trembling. His silk-marked hand brushed her cheek. "Your colors, your emotions, you used them as fuel to reverse the loom." "It was the necessary price, Julian," Alara replied, her gaze steady, unreadable. "The kingdom is free. The violet threads are gone. You have reclaimed your humanity. That is enough." "It's not enough." Julian tightened his grip on her hand. "A free world without emotion, how is that different from an unworked bolt of cloth?" Outside the palace, cheers began to rise. The people had awakened. Small dragons soared through the sky once more, spinning pure white silk to mend the torn valley. A new age was dawning, but inside the ruined hall, victory tasted bitter. Julian understood then. The king had fallen, but the price they had paid was still unfolding. He had regained sensation in half his body, yet the woman he loved was becoming a living loom, perfect, functional, and empty. "I'll find a way to bring them back," Julian vowed, resolve igniting in his voice. "I am an untangler. If I could unravel the enslavement of an entire kingdom, I can find the threads of color you lost." Alara looked at him. Somewhere in her mind, a vague echo stirred a distant memory of how deeply she had once loved this man. She could not feel that love now, but she chose to trust his promise. "Where will you go?" she asked. "To the end of the dragon silk veins," Julian said, rising and helping her stand. "To where the ash dragons are born. Only there, at the origin of all material, can we recover what was lost." Together, they stepped across the ruins of the old palace, moving toward a valley slowly returning to life. One last journey lay ahead, not to save the world, but to reclaim the soul of the weaver who had given everything. Leaving behind the ruined palace of Silken Gate, Julian and Alara pressed deeper into the gray wastes, the place known as the origin of all threads. Here, the ground was not earth or stone, but layers of fine ash exhaled by ancient dragons. There were no birds, no warm winds, only an absolute silence, raw and primordial. Julian walked ahead, his left hand gripping Alara's tightly. He did not dare let go, not even for a moment. He feared that without this physical anchor, she might dissolve completely into her monochrome world. "Alara, do you see the bands of light on the horizon?" Julian stopped and pointed at the sky, where streams of energy flowed like ribbons. "They're blue like the sea, and violet like lavender flowers. They're beautiful." Alara followed his gesture. In her eyes, those bands were merely layers of moving gray. "I see pale gray streaks shifting at high speed," she replied in an even, emotionless tone. "Based on their structure, they appear to be unformed raw silk energy currents." Julian's chest tightened. "I wasn't asking for calculations, Alara. Do you feel anything? Something that reminds you of our old home in the valley?" "My memory remains intact." Alara turned to him, her eyes clear yet hollow. "I remember the house had a roof woven from golden silk, with windows facing east. but that information carries no accompanying sensation. It is like reading an old map. Her calmness was the sharpest blade in the untangler's heart. Julian realized that though she stood beside him, her soul was sealed inside an unbreakable crystal cocoon. He bent down and picked a single ash flower, the only plant that could survive here. "Take this." He placed it in her palm. Alara looked at the gray ash flower. She did not perceive the beauty of resilient life, only the rough texture of ash against her skin. Suddenly, a deep, thunderous roar rose from beneath the ground, shaking the vast silence. Massive ash dragons emerged from clouds of dust. Unlike the silk dragons of the palace, they were ancient and solemn, their scales resembling weathered limestone. These were dragon as sanctuary guardians of the life source itself. The silver thread scars on Julian's arm flared violently in response. Pain crashed through him, forcing him to bend forward as the porcelain white sections of his body cracked, leaking silver luminescence. "Julian!" Alara dropped to her knees beside him. She touched the fracture on his shoulder. For the first time, she sensed something strange through the silver scar on her wrist, not emotion, but resonance. The ash dragons were calling to them. "The consequences of magic are reclaiming control," Julian gasped. "They will not allow someone carrying corrupted dragon silk like me to enter the ash dragoness cradle. Then I will weave a path for you." Alara rose to her feet, her gaze cold, but resolute. Though her emotions were gone, the instinct to protect her companion remained an unbreakable law. She drew the silver shears. The blades no longer reflected light. They absorbed it. She did not cut the air. She began weaving a protective veil from the surrounding ash itself, shielding Julian from the crushing pressure of the source. Together, they moved closer to the mouth of the ash dragon's cradle, a vast fissure radiating the purest white light in existence. There, the secret to restoring Alara's colors awaited them. But the new price might be more devastating than anything they had endured before. Inside the ash dragon's cradle did not come from any single source. It flowed like liquid silk, pure white and viscous, filling the space as if they were walking along the floor of a luminous ocean. Here, gravity seemed to dissolve. The most primordial dragon threads drifted freely, without shape or direction, waiting to be given form by the will of whoever dared to touch them. Julian felt his body grow light. The porcelain white silk along his shoulder softened, synchronizing with the surrounding current of energy. He turned to Alara. She stood calm and motionless, like a frozen lake. In her perception, this sea of light was nothing more than an overwhelming expanse of gray. "We're here," Julian whispered, his voice echoing through the endless space. Suddenly, from the heart of the luminous sea, an entity emerged. It was not a dragon of flesh and bone, but a colossal source thread, coiling into the vague form of an ancient being. It had no eyes, yet Alara felt an all-penetrating gaze pass straight through her soul. A weaver without emotion, and an untangler scarred by consequence. A voice as deep as shifting stone resonated in their minds. "You returned to the origin to reclaim what was willingly cast aside." Julian stepped forward, shielding Alara. "We do not seek to reclaim," he said. "We seek to reweave." She sacrificed her colors to save life itself. "I want to give what remains of my humanity so she may feel again." "Color is not currency to be exchanged," the ancient presence replied. "It is the aftertaste of knots. To see red again, she must feel pain once more. To see blue, she must face solitude again." "Girl, are you prepared for your heart to be torn open by raw sensation?" Alara looked down at her gray hands. Her response was calm, perfectly rational. "Without emotion, I am only an empty loom. A loom that weaves nothing has no reason to exist. I am ready." The luminous entity pulsed, sending silver ripples through the void. "Then, Untangler, use your hands. Immerse them in the primordial dye, your own living essence, and repaint her eyes." Julian did not hesitate. He plunged his silk-altered hand into the core of the source thread. A searing pain erupted, as though thousands of silk needles were extracting his memories and feelings, converting them into color. He saw red from the fury of betrayal, gold from the warmth of nights by the fire, blue from Elara's silent tears. All of it flowed through the silver scar on Julian's wrist and poured into the matching scar on Elara's hand. A soft detonation of light burst outward. Elara gasped, clutching her chest as a burning current raced up her spine. Then the gray world shattered, split by a flash of vivid red, the blood on Julian's fingertips. Then came the brown of his hair, the green of the ash flower she still held. Color returned in a violent rush, carrying with it all the pain, regret, and fierce love she had forced down. Elara cried not dry tears, but the overwhelming release of a soul newly reborn. "Julian," she breathed, her voice trembling with restored emotion. But when she looked again, Julian had become the most exquisite porcelain white statue. He had poured every drop of his soul's dye into repainting her world. He stood there, smiling gently in the sea of light, his gray eyes now eternal gemstones. He had saved her, but at the cost of freezing himself forever within the ash dragon's cradle. Elara fell to her knees, clutching the legs of the cold statue. In a world now overflowing with color, yet missing the heartbeat of the man who had woven life back into her. The world exploded before Elara's eyes. The fierce red of living sap, the deep blue of sorrow, and the radiant gold of hope colors Julian had distilled from his own soul and returned to her. But the joy of seeing color again vanished the instant she looked at the statue before her. Julian stood there, utterly still. The porcelain white shell was no longer cracked or fractured. It was smooth and lustrous, like the most flawless masterpiece ever shaped by the ash dragon's cradle. He was smiling a timeless smile carved from silk and limestone. The gray eyes that once held an entire sky of quiet thought were now gemstones without light. "You can't leave me like this," Elara sobbed, her trembling hand touching the cold curve of his face. "I have my colors back, but without you to see them with me, they're nothing but spilled ink on torn cloth." The silver scar on Elara's wrist suddenly flared with heat. It was no longer a dull, ashen mark, but a pure silver glow that cast its light onto Julian's wrist. There, beneath the porcelain surface, his matching scar still existed, faintly pulsing in a delicate rhythm, the heartbeat of a fate that never truly breaks. The weaver's note: the strongest thread is not woven by magic, but by the empathy of two souls who have crossed the darkness together. Elara drew a deep breath. She understood now that Julian had not truly vanished. He had knotted himself close to shield her from the collapse of the source. She was no longer a fragile weaver in need of protection. She carried his primordial dye within her, and her heart was the only loom capable of weaving life back into him. She sat down, cross-legged before the statue, and placed her hands over his stone-cold ones. Elara did not use the silver scissors. She closed her eyes and began to weave a song with her mind, a song of misty valleys, of nights spent fleeing, of the warmth of late cups of tea in Ashkombi. "If you wove color into me with your soul," she whispered, "then I will weave your heartbeat with my breath." Around them, the ash dragons began to circle, their breath forming a cocoon of multicolored mist. The primordial magic of the cradle responded to Elara's will. Threads of light slipped into the smallest fissures across Julian's porcelain surface. This was no longer a ritual of magic and cost. It was a union. Under the resonance, faint blushes of living flesh appeared beneath the porcelain on Julian's face. A real tear rolled from the stone corner of his eye, melting the rigid shell as it fell. The silence of the ash dragon's cradle shattered beneath a powerful heartbeat, not one, but two rhythms merging into one. The crack of the porcelain white shell rang sharp through the stillness of the ash dragon's cradle. Shards of petrified silk fell onto the gray ash floor, dissolving into glittering motes of light. Beneath Alara's hands, warmth began to spread not from the outside in, but as a surge igniting deep within Julian's chest. A long, trembling breath escaped his lips, once rigid and lifeless. The gem-like eyes shifted slightly, then slowly regained their deep gray hue, but this time, they held no sorrow, no burden of a resolver bound to fate. They reflected only Alara vivid, alive, smiling through tears. Alara, Julian breathed, his voice no longer metallic, but warm as spring sunlight. He reached for her, and this time, the sensation was not the numbness of silk. He felt the softness of her skin, the rapid pulse of emotion beneath her wrist. The silver scars on both of them were no longer marks of bondage. They had fused seamlessly into their flesh, becoming intricate silver filigree that glowed softly like moonlight. When they stepped out of the ash dragon's cradle together, the kingdom spread below the mountains had utterly transformed. The tyrant's violet dominance was gone. The dragon's silk fields now shimmered in natural hues, green of young grass, pink of dawn clouds. Magic was no longer a currency or a tool of enslavement. Small dragons flew freely, releasing silk only when they sensed peace and joy in the hearts of the weavers below. Former guards and slaves had reclaimed their will. No longer puppets, they had become protectors of a renewed life. They did not return to the palace to claim power. Instead, Julian and Alara journeyed to the edge of the valley, to a quiet little hut beside a stream of silver silk. The secret of a beautiful fabric does not lie in the perfection of its threads, Alara would say, but in the spaces between them where love and breath can slip through. There, they opened a small workshop called Misty Bay Silks. Julian used his gift for unraveling to help people mend the hurts in their souls, while Alara wove garments imbued with the colors of healing. Each night, as the mist descended, they sat together on the porch, sharing late cups of tea. The world beyond might still bear many tears needing repair, but between them, the thread of fate had been woven into a perfect circle, unbroken forever. Happiness sometimes does not reside in grand achievements, but hides quietly in the gentle click of a loom on a misty morning. Morning sunlight at Misty Bay was never harsh, softened as if filtered through a thin veil of silk. Inside the small weaving shop called Misty Bay Silks, the scent of herbal tea mingled with the clean fragrance of naturally spun dragon silk, creating a tranquil space wholly removed from the clamor of a kingdom still learning how to rebuild itself. Alara sat beside the oakwood loom, her hands gliding over threads colored like the sea. She no longer wove in haste or hatred. Every stitch, every careful movement, was an act of quiet enjoyment. She paused, admiring the clear blue of the fabric before her, a color she had once believed lost forever. Julian stepped out from the small kitchen, carrying 2 rustic ceramic cups of tea. His movements were unhurried now, free of the heaviness and fractures of porcelain white silk. Though silver patterns still traced his wrist and part of his shoulder, they looked less like remnants of a curse and more like deliberate works of art. "There's a bit of lily blossom from Silverhold in the tea this morning," Julian said as he placed a cup on the windowsill beside a basket of soft yarns. "It should calm your spirit before we welcome our first visitor." Alara smiled as she accepted the warm cup. She felt the heat spread through her palms, real, gentle, and sweet. "You always know how to untangle even my morning sleepiness, don't you?" The glass wind chime at the door rang lightly. A small girl stepped inside, shy and hesitant, wearing a simple daisy-patterned dress. In her hands was an old cloth doll, one arm torn away, the threads around its chest hopelessly tangled. "Excuse me, my mother said you might be able to fix things made of silk," the girl whispered, her wide eyes full of worry. Julian knelt so they were eye level. He gently took the doll into his hands. The resolver's gaze softened not with the sight of dark magic, but with something far simpler. Threads knotted by too much love, tightened by play and memory. With patient fingers, Julian loosened the tangled knots without breaking a single strand. Alara chose a thread the color of warm sunlight and wove an almost invisible seam, reattaching the doll's arm. Within minutes, the doll was whole again, radiating a subtle warmth. The little girl squealed with delight, hugged her toy tightly, and ran back toward the shoreline after leaving behind a heartfelt thank you. As evening settled in, Julian and Alara stood together on the porch, gazing toward the distant peaks where small dragons spun silk into iridescent clouds above the mountains. Julian wrapped an arm around Alara's shoulders, resting his head gently against her hair. "We've woven a happy ending for ourselves, Alara." She turned to face him, meeting the calm gray of his eyes. "No, Julian. This isn't an ending. It's the first thread of a new fabric, one we'll weave together, day after day." Under the glow of sunset, the silver scars on their wrists touched, shining in perfect harmony. There were no palaces now, no thrones, only two souls who had found each other among countless threads of life. May Julian and Alara's journey bring you moments of rest and quiet peace. Thank you for listening.